The views and opinions expressed in these historical letters that may contain vernacular used in the World War II era, the post-war era, and the Cold War era do not reflect the views and opinions of any of the individuals involved with this project, including, but not limited to, the podcast's creators. Morning, Jamie.
Good morning, Allison.
How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing just fine. I've got my coffee.
Me too. Yeah.
Have you got your coffee?
Yeah.
Has everybody got their coffee?
Let's make sure. Let's make sure everybody has what they need. Let's recap last week, Jamie.
Okay, yes, let's recap last week. So we left Hutchinson for good.
That's it.
So no more Hutchinson. This is very it was a stop off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was a point that they were for a little while.
Weeks. It wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot longer than 2 weeks that Sweetie and Lou spent there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they had a Christmas there. They had Thanksgiving there. It was crazy.
They didn't want to have Thanksgiving there, but they did anyway.
Yeah.
So interference going on. Jeanne got to visit. Yep. And we had some nice residents. But we get the news. We have a lot of news that broke in the last episode. First of all, Sweetie's now pregnant.
Yes.
We need to talk about this.
Yes.
So things are going to change a little bit because she is focused now. They are focused now, Sweetie and Lou, on what's going on in their life, what they're going to do after this baby is born. But that was just revealed in the last episode. And then the Mrs. Corey prophecy comes true, which is as soon as she finds out that she's pregnant, he's going to get sent overseas. And we do get the orders that say, hey, Lou, you've been at these NAS bases for a long time. You have not yet seen the ocean for the Navy this entire time. And it's time to go. It's time to go. So Lou's going to be sent east in preparation to get to his destination, which we're uncertain of at the moment. She was hoping that they would go east because at least his family's out there as opposed to San Francisco to head towards the Pacific Theater. So we're going to pick up the story here with Sweetie and Lou having left Kansas, but they are not home in Iowa. And at first, the story starts in Collingdale. Now, this is part of Upper Darby area, Delaware County, Delco, Pennsylvania, which is the address, the home of Lou's parents. So she's staying with the in-laws. They arrive there, and that's where the story resumes. So for everybody that was just catching up, if you haven't listened to this podcast at this point and you want to get all of the backstory on all of that, everything prior to this is Iowa and Kansas. But now we're headed east. Lou has his orders to go overseas, just the question as to when that's going to happen, things like that. Before we get started with today's episode, we'd like to ask everybody, as usual, to please like, share, and subscribe to the Love Sweetie Podcast on YouTube. Please check out our website at www.lovesweetiepodcast.com. And then for our audio listeners, thank you so much to our listeners on the other channels, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the rest. If you can leave a review on those, that would be great. That's very helpful. But thank you all to our audience for joining us with the story thus far as we head into this new phase of Sweetie now on the East Coast. So without further ado, Jamie, I think we can go for the first letter here.
Yeah, cue that letter up.
936 Springfield Road, Collingdale, Pennsylvania, March 20th, 1945. Dear Mom and Daddy, we arrived 30 minutes late to be met by Elizabeth, Joe, and Marguerite, and brought out to the house for a good breakfast. The trip from Chicago was quite unpleasant until about evening because the air conditioning wouldn't work, and the sun was very hot. We got the very last, and probably the most uncomfortable coach on the entire train. At night time, the people in front of us left, so Louis took that seat, and we each laid down to sleep and did not have too bad a night.
Okay.
And we get to our little introduction of the trip here.
And so Elizabeth and Joe are Lou's siblings.
Yep.
And Marguerite is Joe's wife.
Yes.
Yes. So this is the first time that that Sweetie has met Marguerite, isn't it? Isn't this?
I think so. I think this is the first time.
Yeah.
And Joe's been overseas. That's the other thing to consider. They were just there when Samuel had been thought maybe the worst was going to happen, Samuel being Lou's father, over the holidays. So if anybody missed the holiday episodes, they'd just been to visit right around Christmas, just in case. It's not clear that Joe was home at the time. He was still in England, but he's returned
Yeah, they
now.
didn't mention that. Yeah.
Right, yeah, and now we're here with Marguerite. So we're getting to learn more about these characters that have been kind of in the background of the story. And then unfortunately she had a rough trip from Chicago.
I know, and she's pregnant. Every time I like reading through this, we have to remember she's also in her first trimester.
Yep.
So yeah, so you can imagine how uncomfortable she is.
Lewis's daddy seems to have failed lots since we were here in December, and the doctor, very frankly, gives little hope of his lasting very long. They are draining water off his badly swollen legs, and yesterday they drained off 1.5 quarts. His kidneys refuse to function, and he refuses to eat. So you see how it is. We've been hoping Lou won't be sent out from New York for a while yet, for the excitement would be hard on him. Lou goes on to New York next Sunday. Of course, I'll not go until we find out his duty nights and what hours he'll have. If we find out he's going to be there only a little while, I may go and stay with Bob and Florence until he leaves. We cannot hope that he'll be left there for months, but with good luck, it may be for a few weeks. Speculating, of course, we believe he'll go to England from New York. We cannot know for sure, nor how long he'll be there.
Yep.
So this is really nice, though, because her brother Bob, Sweetie's brother Bob, is in New York.
Yep.
So she's got family. So I think we were saying earlier, like, it's nice that they're out east and not west.
Yeah.
You know, that they were able to like have these places to go. And this was in 1945. And so the effort in the wars, Allison, if you could like help me out here.
Sure. Yeah.
In that theater, there really wasn't as much activity as there was on the Western Front, right?
Yeah, things are winding down the European theater. Just to put this into perspective, the Soviet Union is really closing in on Germany's Eastern Front. At this point, D-Day is, 9 months ago. So that movement through Western Europe of Allied forces, they're encroaching on the other side. Germany's really feeling this two-front war. Italy had been out of it for a bit at this point. So Germany's really getting surrounded. If we're looking at like the major timeline with regards to the war in the West, we can bear in mind, since we're in March of 1945, I believe it's at the end of April of 45. That's when Hitler commits suicide. So if you put that in like the perspective of, you know, when Hitler's going to be gone, he's gone before May of 45. So that's just how desperate the situation is becoming in Germany, and especially the situation on the Eastern Front in Germany as the Soviets are heading in. Because the amount of men just being thrown at that Eastern theater is so gigantic. There's a lot of like content about this. We have to understand sort of, and we'll go through this at some point at the end of the war, we'll go through sort of the big casualties, because World War II is the biggest casualty war in history. It just is. And the vast majority of this, as with regards to the European theater, is that Eastern Front against the Soviets. But they're encroaching. That vice is closing on Germany. So we can tell that Sweetie, I think, is a bit relieved that they're in the East, because if he is going to be sent overseas, it's in a theater that's winding down.
Yes.
The other side is not winding down at all, and we're going to talk about this on April 1st. That's when the Battle of Okinawa starts. You know, we just in the last episode, we were talking about the bombings in Tokyo, and we were talking about Iwo Jima. Okinawa hasn't happened yet. It's about to happen 11 days after this letter. That's when the start of Okinawa is going to be. So that's very, very active in the Pacific. We know Frank is over there, because Chester's been writing to Frank. But the Western European theater is very much heading towards a conclusion at this point. And then we do get the update from Samuel. The doctors are like, I don't think he's going to make it that long. So it's probably best that they were home for Christmas that year. And it looks like things really could have gone south pretty quickly. There's also this phrase in this part of the letter where he says, we've been hoping Lou won't be sent out from New York for a while yet, for the excitement would be hard on him. The concern here is now Joe's home. they don't want to upset Samuel with the idea that something could still happen to his kids during the war. So,
and he's at a point now too, Samuel, that he's not eating.
Right.
And as Chester, as a doctor, would know this, that like when you get to that point with an older individual and they like stop eating,
it becomes harder.
that the end is near.
I did quite well on the trip, though the heat seemed oppressive and conducive to nausea. With rest, I'm all right again, aside from feeling something like the fifth wheel. We were washing. We had to bring along some of Lou's socks and underwear, and when they are clean and dried, I can get me out of the way, darning socks and underwear, and patching 3 pair of dungarees. Joe Graham is quite like his picture, but all the same there is a little feeling of superiority that leaves me feeling a little downhill. His wife has the ability to masterfully hold the conversation or situation, and as a result, Elizabeth, who is inclined to be quiet, is even more reticent, and Lou's mom works herself into a pink fit to keep things clicking the way Marguerite would. Lou is out chopping up quite a pile of wood to put away for his mother, and I believe I'll go hang out the clothes to get into the sunshine and air. There's no snow, and the weather is really nice. I wish you'd send this on to Jeanne, for it may take me another day to get a letter written to her. Write soon. Love, Sweetie, and Lou.
That's lovely that he came home and started chopping wood for his mom.
Yeah. And then this phrase, we got to talk about the personalities of Joe and Marguerite and the relationship with the family here.
So they do kind of seem to be big personalities.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's enough to drive back Elizabeth's personality. I love how she's like, Elizabeth gets really quiet around Marguerite, and then Sydney's in whatever a pink fit means.
She's probably just like a little more intense and like, like, oh, and then just, haha. Yeah. You've been around people that are a little bit big personality, and like, it can be a little intimidating.
Yeah. And this is fair for Joe. I mean, Joe's an actor, so I think we should expect it, but to hear about it from Marguerite as well, that there's this air of superiority, and especially Sweetie, she judges immediately. The first impressions are big with Sweetie. Oh, yeah. So for her, that practical Midwesterner being like, this is a big personality over here. Elizabeth isn't really talking too much. Yeah. It's an interesting, first impression.
Would you imagine, though, that Joe would, like, pick anybody else for a life partner?
No.
Like, he needed somebody that could hang. Could, Sweetie. I think I would love to meet Joe and Marguerite.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I bet you she's lots of fun.
Now, she hails, I think, from Texas. Her mother,
there you go.
Texas.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
So,
even personalities, apparently.
Yep.
And actually, my grandfather was in Texas, and I can attest to it. Yeah. That's how they are.
Yep. But then we fast forward a little bit here, only about a week later. And Sweetie's making the most of the time that she has with Lou in the East. And they finally get to that ocean. I just want to bring that up as a moment. Good job, Lou. Now you can see the water again. It's been a while, Mr. Navy.
You're in the Navy in the Midwest.
Yep.
In the middle of the country, about as far away from the ocean as you can get.
Alas, a boat. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I'm sure there's boats out there, but you know what I mean. Yeah, so we find ourselves on the boardwalk. This
is actually really a nice letter because Sweetie says, "Can you please send this to Jeanne?" Because she wasn't able to get, but then she does get a letter to Jeanne.
Yeah.
March 28th, 1945. Bob's house on the boardwalk. Dear Jeanne, I started a letter to you once before, but it didn't get finished or mailed, so I'll try to do a better job of it now anyway. We arrived in Philly at 5:35 a.m. Monday to be met by Elizabeth, Marguerite, and Joe, newly arrived from England. I was pretty tired, but didn't actually feel too bad. We got into the car and to 936 Springfield Road in about a half hour, and after we said hello to Lou's daddy, had consumed a good breakfast, we went to bed. We got up at 2 p.m., feeling much better. Lou's daddy has not improved. If anything, he may be a little weaker. But he has good days when he's as bright as can be, and he has days when he feels tired and sleeps most of the day. His feet are still swollen, some days worse than others. They have drained the water off, and on one day got a quart and a pint. The doctor very frankly gives no hope of complete recovery, and says he may not be able to hold on much longer. Joe has been somewhat of a tonic for him, but Lou's mom let it slip that Lou might be shipped out soon, and undid some of the good work. He seemed glad to have the whole crew home at once, and for a while I felt hopes that he'd begin to improve. Joe is quite like his dad, much more so than Louis is, but excuse me for sticking out my chest and bragging, I'm absolutely sure that I got the best Graham of the bunch.
Word.
I know.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So sweet. She confirmed that everybody being home is doing Samuel some good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely helping. And they just don't want to stress him out. So Sydney dropping like, oh, Lou might go. Sydney, like, 'cause she's the worry ward. She's got all this anxiety. And that's the previous loss of Sammy Jr. is affecting her at all times. She lets this slip, and it's like, we've been trying to keep that quiet.
Like, shush.
Like, shush.
Mom, what are you saying?
Yeah.
Stop talking. Yeah.
But it's nice to hear that Joe's home. And again, we get a little bit of a recap of the initial meeting between Sweetie and then Joe and Marguerite. And then we get this comparison to Samuel, which is really fun. And then the compliment of all compliments. I still have the best one.
She does.
Mm-hmm.
She did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The weather in Kansas was rainy and certainly not wash day weather, so I had to bring along quite a few dirty clothes. Tuesday, next day after our arrival, was nice and sunny, so Lou's mom and I washed, while Lou went and spaded the garden for his mom. He didn't get finished, but he got a good start, and then he had to do something else. Well, we were quite glad to go to bed when bedtime came. Wednesday, I believe we all went over to 69th Street to go to a movie, San Diego, I Love You. Only fair, I thought. This was the only time we went out at night, and we just stayed home. Louis played with stamps, I darned socks, and patched 2 pairs of dungaree pants for Lou to take along with him. Saturday, Elizabeth got off work at noon, so we all went into town to spend what was left of the afternoon. Joe browsed around a couple of music stores to buy some records and sheet music. We had a letter from Sister in which she sent a picture of each of the kids. Lou's dad saw them and gave me $1 to buy something for them for Easter. So we moseyed around the dime store trying to buy something to send them. Then we went to a drugstore for Cokes, sandwiches, ice cream. I had 1 lonesome glass of milk before going to the movie to see Rita Hayworth, Janet Blair, etc. in Tonight and Every Night. From there we went to a real nice cafe for deviled crab dinner, and so on home. Sunday, Marguerite and Joe and Lou and I took Elizabeth's car and went for a long sightseeing ride out to Hedgerow Theatre, Springfield Dam, and see the nice residential districts. We came home to a big chicken dinner and then spent the evening with Pop until 11:45, when Joe, Marguerite, and I took Lou into 30th Street Station to catch a train to New York.
I actually want to pause here real quick because we've got some sort of sites to just talk about that are going on here. And it's really these 2 areas. We get the mention of 69th Street in the previous page, and we also get 30th Street Station. 30th Street Station, and these are both in Philadelphia. 30th Street Station in Philadelphia is like the station that would most compare to Union Station in Kansas City or to Grand Central in New York. It's the big one. It still is to this day. To this day, it's still operational. It is the connection of all of the SEPTA trains in the middle of Philadelphia. It's very close to the University of Pennsylvania, but it's also the Amtrak lines are running through 30th Street, and it has that grand feeling. So when they're talking about catching the train to New York, this is very much operational at the time, very operational today. So if anybody's traveling Philadelphia to New York by train, they're going to be going through 30th Street. 69th Street, where she mentions they went to go see the movie, is right now, that's a portion of what we'd consider West Philadelphia. Kind of a rougher neighborhood these days, but it's it's like the subway connection. 69th Street is well known to anybody in the Philadelphia area because most subway stops, everybody might not know, but everybody's heard of 69th Street. So I just wanted to give that background. And if anybody's visiting Philly, go see 30th Street Station. definitely. You might even be traveling in and out of it.
We came on home to bed, and I had gotten up, had breakfast, and was waiting for the spirits to move me to get to work at about 1:20 when Lou called me. He had gone to Pier 92 and checked in at 2 or thereabouts. He had spent the rest of the night on a bunk equipped only with springs until 5:30 when they blew reveille over a loudspeaker and really blew him out of bed. For breakfast, they had French toast and coffee and cereal. He phoned Bob's office at Floyd Bennett to be told that Monday was his day off. He phoned the residence the Navy bag had given him the number 7, got him. They had just that morning received a letter from you saying we were in the vicinity. Bob came out to the pier and arranged a 12-hour liberty for him. Then he called his skipper to see if he could help get Lou transferred to his squad row. They agreed to try that since the crew has already been assigned. They thought it would be nearly impossible. Lou is at Pier 92 now, which is just a receiving station where they are put to work sweeping, scrubbing, hauling garbage, etc., until they are assigned to other duty. In all probability, he will not be here long, unless the wire pulling is successful.
Yeah, so there's a lot here.
Mm-hmm.
So when he got there, then he had to sleep on a, oh man,
On the
probably
bunk,
didn't get
yeah.
much sleep at all.
No, I doubt it. Yeah.
And then but Bob is trying to pull some wires or pull some strings and get him on his squad. That's nice.
Yeah, he's like, oh, Sweetie's here with Lou, and he's over on the pier. Maybe I can do something. This is going to be really difficult at this point, though. So they've traveled up to New York. Floyd Bennett is Floyd Bennett Field. So that's where there's a big military station going on. Bob, being an officer, is able to try and get a little bit done here for Lou, but we have to imagine how many Navy guys and how many just military in general are in and out of New York as the major point moving back and forth to Europe. So basically, Lou's arrived, and what's the first thing you're going to do with some Navy guys that are arrived that aren't leaving yet? Well, we're going to put you on some sort of like work, clear the pier, do some scrubbing, things like that, because you still have to get the day-to-day done, but they're waiting for those orders. So we get this big scene of just where everybody is. But it's wonderful that Bob and Florence are there. So Sweetie has,
and
she knows.
Jeanne wrote to them and let them know too. Jeanne wrote to Bob and said, "Hey, Sweetie and Lou are going to be in the area, and let you know, heads up."
Yep.
So that was sweet.
Yeah.
I left Philly at 4 p.m., arrived in New York at 5:40. Everybody met me, including KM. We checked luggage and went to eat. KM was then tired, and so rather than go to a show, we came out to Rockaway Beach, and so as to bed. They have a very nice apartment here, and the location is ideal. It is too bad they have to move, but it's just one of those things. I think KM is just as cute as can be, though I must say she is a bit spoiled. Both Lou and Bob have duty tomorrow night, so we'll be here alone. We are going back to Philly this weekend since Lou has time off. Lou's dad evidently is afraid he'll not live, for he keeps saying, "Don't be gone very long now." Kinda circulate this letter, will you? For I've been negligent about writing. As soon as we know anything for sure, we'll let you hear about it. They've appreciated your letters and hope you will all keep writing. Lots of love. Lou and Sweetie.
That was very sweet, and it's so nice that she can spend time with Bob and Florence.
It is. And KM is there. So KM's not staying with any in-laws or anything like that. Florence has brought the baby with her. So we have Bob and Florence and the baby, and now Lou and Sweetie, and now they're in New York. So we'll have to see at what point. The big question is, at what point is Lou going to head out overseas?
Yes.
So, and we're going to linger with that question for a little bit. But we do have another letter for today. We head into April 3rd of 1945. And again, Okinawa has now just started on April 1st, the first land invasion there. So just to keep that in the back of everyone's minds, and as we're heading towards that end of the European theater.
April 3rd, 1945. Bob's house. Dear Jeanne, I haven't the time to write you a very long letter. If I'm going to write it all and get it off, I'll have to be short and brusque and leave the chit-chat till later, when I can do it justice. Don't be provoked with a short letter, please. You know, we've been with Bob and Florence. Lou had the weekend off from 1 p.m. Saturday until 7 a.m. Monday morning. We went to Philly over the weekend and came back here Sunday night. Lou went on to Pier 92 after he'd brought me out here. Monday last night was his night on duty, so he spent the night aboard. Tonight he was to have come out in time for supper, but just as time came that he should be home, he called to say that they'd come across and taken up the Liberty cards. Supposedly, they take up the Liberty cards in the evening, and they ship out the next morning. He tried to pull a few wires to come out and spend our anniversary night with me, but no go. He's going to call me in the morning, and if he thinks he's going out, then I'm going to go to New York, to the pier, to see him if it's possible. If taking up the ID cards tonight means what it usually does, he shall sail tomorrow. If such is the case, I'll be home soon. For the longer I hang around in Philly, the harder it will be to get away. And I am to have my baby my way.
That's right, girl.
That's
You
right.
have your baby your way.
Mm-hmm. When she says,
I love her.
Oh, yeah. And when she says, I'll be home soon, she is going to have this baby in Iowa. She wants to get back to the Demarys. She's like, nope, this is in Iowa. This is going to be an Iowa kid. You know, he's going to be born in Iowa.
Yes.
He or she, whatever the gender happens to be. But we seem inclined to think already, just from selections being made, that they seem to think it's a boy.
She thinks it's a boy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked about this in the last episode. And then we get the Liberty cards get taken up. Okay.
Yeah.
The passes, the leaves, it's like, yo, they can't have anybody just out wandering on Liberty when they're trying to find them if they're going to set sail. So the Navy's just like, okay, guys, sorry, you know, got to make sure everyone's where they're supposed to be. Can't have any loose ends floating around on some PTO out there in the city, anywhere in New York, especially trying to find. Maybe it would be a little different if it was like sort of a smaller location. You'd be able to be like, okay, this guy's over here, but nah, you're not going to find anybody.
No,
in the
they
city,
want him.
so.
They want him where they can get him. Yeah.
Time to go.
Yeah.
Time to go. So we get that final word there.
They're sure pleased that you're taking such an interest in Afghans, beds, etc. Lou says he's satisfied Jeanne will look after me anyway. I bought 2 pair of baby shoes, size 0 and size 1 at outlandish price. I hope to get size 2 and 3 before May 1st. If Lou leaves as soon as we fear he will, I'll be coming home soon. If it hangs very long, I probably won't have much time or inclination to write. Don't be surprised to get a wire saying I'll soon arrive in Des Moines. Bob and Florence are moving this Thursday to 3810 Avenue R, Brooklyn, New York. Bob's going to borrow a car to move heavy things. It is a basement apartment, but it is a new house, and so should not be damp for KM. They've been so nice to us that I'll have to repay them some way. We are going to walk down and mail these tonight, and I want to write a fan letter to Lou in case he leaves tomorrow. I'm going to need a strong arm to ease over his leaving, and I'm glad I can come home. Keep writing, and I'll try to, too. Love, Sweetie.
She signed it Love Sweetie.
Mm-hmm.
And not Lou.
Yeah, because Lou is heading out.
Because Lou's not there, I know.
Yep. So here's the prophecy fulfilled. What's going
Mrs. Corey knew what was up.
Yep. Yeah. And Bob and Florence are remaining in New York, but she's like, as soon as I can get back to Iowa after this is done. And she says, I'm going to go to Des Moines. There's only one person in Des Moines. She's going to Jeanne. She's not going to Ottumwa. She didn't say, I'm going to go to Lacona. She's not going to stay with her parents if she can avoid it. Nope. Staying with Jeanne. Like,
if
that
she
is
can avoid it.
This is her way. She wants to stay with Jeanne. That's really critical. I love the note about all these little baby shoes, like all these different sizes, 0, 1, 2, and 3. And, you know, I've always found it fascinating. If you look at old portraits from the 19th century, a lot of kids, they didn't make baby shoes as frequently because kids outgrow shoes so much that most kids were barefoot most of their lives in the earlier generations. So this is one of the newer generations that's actually even purchasing these items. She says outlandish prices.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, for all the more that you would ever use them.
Yeah. Once
it's true.
They're outgrown, yeah.
It's true. And like, that's even today. Like when I buy shoes from the kids, sometimes I'll just go to consignment sales. Like, and like that kind of stuff. And you'll find brand new shoes that people have bought that they didn't even put on them maybe one time.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's funny. Yeah, she's excited about the baby.
She is.
She's happy, and it's awesome, and it's just really, it's sad that the prophecy has come true. But she's gonna have her baby, and she's handling everything. That's how it is.
She's very much in charge of what she wants to do. Like,
yeah,
she's settled with this idea that he has to go. And she's going to do what she needs to do. And it's nice to hear a confident Sweetie saying, this is the plan. That's it. And moving on from there. So we'll pick up next week with the letters with that. Now, I do have another document to bring up on the screen here so that we can see this. And this is just something that was in the collection as one of the correspondences. So I'll bring this up here. This is a transcription of that document. So we get a notice of a change of address to Jeanne. And where this comes in is important, is this is being sent by Lou to Jeanne. So he wants to maintain communications. And as we're going to see, he's going to do that, exactly that, with Jeanne. Because as much as Sweetie is very confident about everything going on, Lou's going to be very much employing Jeanne to make sure everything's okay. Because Jeanne's extremely responsible and she's the RN. And they have this great relationship. So he sends this change of address over to Jeanne. You can see where he's switching. She's living at Cottage Grove. The change of address indicates he's now with the fleet, basically. And he's still in New York when he sends this, but he's saying, here's my address with the fleet. Stay in contact. And this is going to play out as well. But if people were wondering how that was happening, here's his official information. Now, the AMM3C that we've been seeing that's the aviation machinist mate. That's his official title, and 3C is third class. So because he was upgraded from the second class. So yeah, aviation machinist mate, third class for any of our military listeners, and you want to know the ranking specific to World War II. That's the rank he holds when he's going overseas.
Aviation? Say it one more time.
Aviation machinist mate.
Aviation machinist mate.
Right, because he's working on the engines.
That's AMM. So they would be like AMM, MAMM. Okay. All right.
That's what we keep seeing there on these documents. We're going to see that coming up as we see these letters coming over from Lou. And thankfully, those letters survive again. Jeanne's the superhero here because she had them all, so we get to see.
Oh, thank you so much, Aunt Jeanne.
Yep. She's the best. But that's it for the documentation for today. And then in the next episode, we're going to pick up where we left off with that. But we also have to talk about the historical context today, as usual, with how things are going. Now, we talked about this a little bit earlier in the episode. We talked about Okinawa starting. We give sort of a time frame of what's going on in the Western Theater. But there's a major event that's going to happen between this last letter on April 3rd and the first letter that we're going to review next week, which is on April 20th. There's a major event that happens on April 12th. And for that event, we're going to go back to what's happening in Washington, D.C. Very, very important. And for this information, we can't do it any better. We're going to bring out our amazing reference from the David McCullough, the Truman Pulitzer Prize-winning biography, for people following along at home in your personal copy, as everyone should have, of the Truman bio, page 341 of the hardcover edition here. So
take out your Truman book.
Take out your textbook on Truman. This is the only textbook on Truman that matters. Sorry, everybody else that wrote a bio. This is it, the McCullough. And it describes the event that takes place on April 12th, 1945. So just putting ourselves in this Truman storyline. Now, in the last episode, we talked about the inauguration, right? It was like 15 minutes. It was really bleak. And Roosevelt's not looking well. So that was January 20th. This is 82 days later. That's it. So I'm going to pick up, really, this is the end of this little chapter here. And it says, apparently it was Deschler, this is one of the other individuals who's in the scene, who reminded Rayburn that Truman had a call from the White House. That's the biggest thing. There's an urgent call that Truman needs to take. And this is coming over from the White House. And it continues, Steve Early wants you to call him right away, Rayburn said. Truman mixed himself a drink, then dialed the number, National 1414. So that was how you reached the White House at the time, apparently. "This is the VP," he said. Steve Early's voice sounded tense and strange. Truman was to come to the White House as quickly and as quietly as he could, and to enter by the main entrance on Pennsylvania Avenue. As Louis Daschler later recounted, Truman lost all his color. "Jesus Christ and General Jackson," he said, putting down the phone. He was wanted at the White House right away, he told the others. They must say nothing. He went out the door alone. Then he began to run, taking a different route. He kept to the ground floor this time, racing down a hall between a double line of bronze and marble Civil War generals and forgotten state governors, his shoes pounding on the marble floor. He ran through the echoing old crypt, past the Senate barber shop, then up a flight of stairs with brass banisters to his office to get his hat. He told Harry Vaughn he was on his way to the White House and to keep that to himself. In minutes, he was in the big Mercury, with Tom Hardy driving, but still no Secret Service guard, moving with all possible speed through the evening traffic. By now it was approximately 5:15 p.m. What thoughts were rushing through his mind he never fully revealed. "I thought I was going down there to meet the president," he later said. "I didn't allow myself to think anything else." To his mother, he would write, it occurred to him that perhaps Roosevelt had returned from Warm Springs because the retired Episcopal Bishop of Arizona, an old friend of the president's, had been buried that day. "I thought that maybe he wanted me to do some special piece of liaison work with the Congress and had sent for me to see him after the funeral." But if this was so, why had he run back to his office? "I ran all the way," he told her. What did he imagine he was running toward or leaving behind? At the White House, the long black car turned off Pennsylvania through the Northwest Gate and swept up the drive, stopping under the North Portico. The time was 5:25. Two ushers were waiting at the door. They took his hat and escorted him to a small oak-paneled elevator, more like an ornate cage, that had been installed in the Theodore Roosevelt era, and that ascended now very slowly to the second floor. In the private quarters across the center hall in her sitting room, Mrs. Roosevelt was waiting. With her were Steve Early and her daughter and son-in-law, Anna and John Boettiger. Mrs. Roosevelt stepped forward and gently put her arm on Truman's shoulder. "Harry, the president is dead." Truman was unable to speak. "Is there anything I can do for you?" he said at last. "Is there anything we can do for you?" she said. "For you are the one in trouble now." And that concludes that chapter, and that's how Harry Truman finds out about the death of President Roosevelt, FDR, on April 12th of 1945. So in between these letters, we have the passing of the president. And it's the presidency. Truman's going to be sworn in, of course. If you read the McCullough, he describes that ceremony. Imagine there's no Secret Service guarding the VP, right? He's just rushing. President's dead, no Secret Service guarding the VP as they're rushing over to the White House to get that news, and that amazing scene from Eleanor Roosevelt who's like, "You're the one that needs help now." Because here's a guy, the only president in the 20th century that never went to college. The honest guy going in to serve the farmer from Missouri who had been a senator, who was unexpected at most to be a pick. He was a good pick, obviously, but he wasn't necessarily going to be the VP until, August of the previous year. He's never been to Europe, except for one time when he served in the military in World War I. And now he's going to have to rapidly catch up on everything going on for the entire war and work with Churchill and work with Stalin and try to end this thing. There has been no president in American history that has ever been had to be called into service as the president during a war in this nature, and Harry Truman finds himself there. So I think it's really important to give that background, that as Lou's going out to England, shortly thereafter, there's a complete change in the executive leadership of the country. And we'll pick up next week with the aftermath of FDR's passing, of President Roosevelt's death. But now it's President Truman. That's it.
All right. And we'll see. And with that, we will see you next week.
See you next week.